Flayer might be the most controversial skill in Monster Hunter Wilds. There have been a lot of different videos talking about it, either directly or just as a mention on what skills a weapon should use. A lot of people seem to think that this skill is bugged or just straight up useless. This video from SD Shepard was really helpful in learning about the skill early on. Since then, I've seen more testing efforts, and recently a pretty detailed post about the skill was posted on the Monster Hunter Meta subreddit. In my opinion, this represents probably our best understanding of the skill at the moment, so I wanted to go through that post for you and add my thoughts on how you should be approaching the skill. But first, let's talk about what Flayer says it does in the tooltip. Makes it easier to inflict wounds. Upon inflicting enough damage, also deals additional non-elemental damage. This skill was exciting for a lot of people considering how powerful wounds can be. Having a skill that makes more of them seems like an easy choice, right? Well, let's understand exactly what's going on with Flayer on a deeper level. The increased wounding and the bonus damage. I'm going to refer to these as wounding damage and bonus damage respectively, which should make more sense as we get through the video. Let's explain wounds first. You have a monster part that hasn't taken any damage. We'll call this the normal state. Once you damage that part enough, we move to the tear state, which is when you see a white mark on the monster part. The tear signals that a wound is close to appearing on a part. Hit this tear enough and it'll turn into a glowing red mark noticeable in focus mode, which means that a wound is opened. By damaging this wound enough or by hitting it directly with a focus attack, you'll pop the wound and then the process starts all over again. But there's a catch. Parts have limits to how many times they can be wounded. Once you reach that limit, the part will scab over and you can create no more wounds on that part. That last part is extra important. Wounds are a limited use mechanic on a monster. Now that we understand wounds clearly, how does Flayer impact this process with the wounding damage that I mentioned before? It works similar to Part Breaker if you're familiar with that skill. To wound a part, you have to do a certain amount of damage to progress from one stage to the next. For example, if a part needs 500 damage to open a tear and you do 100 damage per hit, you would have to hit it 5 times to create the tear. How the wounding damage part works is that it gives us a 33% chance to increase the damage that the wound takes. And I want to emphasize, the wound and not the monster. You're not doing more damage to the monster, you're just causing the wound to appear more quickly. So if Flayer increases our wounding damage by 30%, which is what it does at Flayer level 5, in our previous example, we would be doing 130 damage per hit to the part, assuming Flayer procced on every hit, which is unlikely in reality. If the part needs 500 damage to tear, it would take us only 4 hits to open a tear instead of 5 because 4 times 130 is 520. But again, it's RNG, so really you might only get 1 proc out of these 4 hits, which would put us at 430 damage instead of 520, meaning that we will still need the 5th hit to open the tear anyway. And again, just so you don't confuse this, we have not done extra damage to the monster. The part just thinks that we did so that the wound appears faster. The monster has still only taken 500 damage from our 5 hits. It's only boosted for the wound calculation. I'll show the value of each level on screen now. Flayer starts at 5% at level 1 and scales all the way up to 30% bonus wounding damage at level 5. But there's another catch, and it's a really big one. This is why you probably saw a lot of people saying that the skill wasn't working. Flayer has a lot of attacks that simply do not work with it. This isn't a bug either, because we have received official confirmation from Capcom that this is intended, and that they will be updating the description of the skill later to explain it better. I'll put some of the known attacks on screen now, since we're still trying to figure out everything that doesn't work with it. Highlights of this would be the Demon Flurry and Blade Dance from Dual Blades, and Strong Descending Slash and Rising Spiral Slash from the Insect Glaive. These and many other attacks on this list are core elements of the gameplay loops of the weapons. Add to all this the fact that Flayer also has an internal cooldown which prevents it from being applied multiple times on multi-hit moves. It makes a lot of sense that people felt like it wasn't doing anything with all these restrictions in place, and it also explains why so many people were having different experiences with it. For some of these weapons just off the list alone, it might be easy for you to decide to never use the skill, and I wouldn't blame you at all. But now, let's talk about that bonus non-elemental damage that Flayer gives us to paint a full picture. The bonus damage component of Flayer works like other status effects. We build up the Flayer damage status, and once it hits a certain threshold, we get a proc of bonus damage. It has the same 33% chance to proc the buildup like the bonus wounding damage does. If this sounds similar to Blast, that's because it is. However, it's not quite the same. While the original post suggests that this status can only be built up on a part that is in the normal state, a user in the comments Falsius tested using an overlay and confirmed that the Flayer damage status can be built up regardless of the state of the part that you're hitting. However, the actual damage application can only happen on a part that is in the normal or tear states. What this means is that, like wounds, there is a limit to how many times you can proc the bonus damage. Unlike other status effects, the buildup is not shared with other players. Building up your Flayer damage burst will not help other players to build theirs. This bonus damage will contribute to the damage needed to open a wound. This means that the more damage you deal, the less damage potential you have from Flayer since you'll be building scabs faster. More levels of Flayer does not seem to increase the build-up rate, only the actual amount of damage dealt, which I'll show on screen now. Like the increased wounding damage, the bonus damage will also not work with the same list of attacks from before. This hopefully paints the clearest picture possible on Flayer that we can have now. It puts the skill into an awkward state, and in some ways, I feel like it's going to get a rework eventually. It just doesn't make sense to have such a confusing skill with so many restrictions on how it can be used, let alone to not have any idea of these restrictions just from reading the tooltip in the game. Even for Monster Hunter, which isn't afraid of having big explanations, this seems a little extreme. Maybe my perspective is just off and I should treat it like other skills such as artillery or rapid morph, where they are only ever going to be used for certain weapons. Even if that were the case or the intent, it seems weird to have a skill tied to such a core part of the game's main gimmick being as restricted as it is. Personally, as an insect glaive main, I can't see myself wanting to use as much even though I was really excited about it. There are some parts of the kit that apply it, but all of that is multi-hit anyway. I don't know everything about every weapon, so maybe a few stand out as good users of it. Something else to consider is that if you want to maximize the value of Flayer, you have to intentionally not only use weaker attacks from your weapon in some cases, but also target all parts of the monster. If you typically focus on the head, those other parts won't ever see wounds really. That said, in reality, people often take damage when they can, and not everybody has perfect positioning, where they can always hit their preferred spot 100% of the time. So there's still some merit to hitting other parts if it'll happen naturally anyway. You just kind of have to know yourself and what you're capable of. I'll link to the relevant Reddit post in the video description so that you can read everything for yourself if you'd like. With the knowledge that we have now, let me know if you can think of a build, weapon, or even specific monster where it makes sense to use Flayer. I'd love to know in the comments, and if you enjoy topics like this, subscribe, join my Discord, and I'll see you in the next video.